Welcome to Through the Veil podcast. I'm Elle.
I'm Camille.
Today we have Julie with us. We're terribly excited. Julie, would you like to give us a brief introduction about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Yes, like you said, my name is Julie Cluff, and I am a mom of six children, a grandma of 11, and I do all the things. I'm a coach. I specialize in grief, and I do angel readings. So a lot of things. We're gonna explore it all today, I think.
Lots of talents.
Yeah.
We found Julie through Lindsay. For those of you who have listened to our episodes with Lindsay, she's fantastic. She took grief coaching through you, right, Julie? You offer grief coaching courses?
I do. I do offer grief coaching courses. Yes.
I can't remember where I found you like years ago, but your story, I've heard your story before. Um, it's a very like unique story. So if you want to just kind of dive in on what even got you on this path to be so like to be someone who studies grief and someone who teaches others how to be grief coaches.
Well, I think birth brought me to this path. Honestly, everything in my life has pointed in this direction. I lost my brother to suicide. And then a couple of years later, my first marriage ended in divorce. And I had three small children. And very quickly, honestly, too quickly after that, I joke, my husband, we've been married now for 31 years, but he started asking me to marry him after like 2 or 3 weeks of dating. I'm like, I just was divorced. I'm like, I'm not ready for this. But
That was pretty quick.
yeah, it was pretty quick. But he did eventually succeed in talking me into marrying him, and I did marry him, and we had three more children. So we have six children, and life was looking pretty good. I mean, we had the typical ups and downs, and I had gone through a lot of challenges, with my brother and the divorce and other things that I don't typically talk about, but I'd gone through a number of challenges, and then I was getting to this place where I was like, oh, life is good. I can relax and just enjoy my life and not be watching for the next shoe to drop. Well, unfortunately, on Mother's Day in 2007, I loaded up my three youngest children in the car. We were headed from Texas, where we lived at the time, out to visit grandparents in the East, and we were having a great trip. And my son James was 12 at the time. He was sitting in the front seat, and my daughter Carrie was 10. My son David was 8. They were in the back seat and having this lovely trip. And then all of a sudden, mid-afternoon, I woke up behind the wheel, bouncing along the grass in the median between the eastbound and westbound lanes of highway. And when I tried to pull my SUV back up on the road, because obviously I was in just tremendous shock. When I tried to pull my vehicle back up on the road, the wheels just lifted up off the ground, and we rolled and rolled and rolled. And we rolled across 2 lanes of highway, landed in the grass on the other side of the highway. Um, and it's the traumatic scene that you can imagine. It was horrific. Carrie and David had been thrown from the car, and they passed away that day on Mother's Day. Um, and it changed our life forever. I knew the minute I was consciously aware and looking out the broken glass windshield and all the destruction around me, I knew no matter what happened, that our life had changed forever. I suffered from PTSD, complicated grief. It was the living hell that you can just imagine for the next 3 years.
That's just, I mean, I have no words. That's a lot to take in.
Grief is one of the most difficult things I think that we can experience in a human experience, right? It's complicated, it's messy. Even coming from like a very faithful Christian background where we have the hope, right, of seeing and meeting our family again, and it's something that we're supposed to believe and buy into. Um, did it challenge your faith? Like, did it shake you?
It did shake me, but not in the ways that that you may think. I had an immediate understanding that Carrie and David were fine. I felt that even in those early days of the crisis and just the overwhelm and all the words that you can think of, just that space of disbelief and horror, and I knew they were okay. And so that piece was very comforting to me. But what I didn't know is, am I okay?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that's where I had to reestablish my relationship with God in a very real way. And it's hard for me to even comprehend now, but at the time, I actually thought that God was punishing me.
Mm.
I held that belief for 3 years. I thought, surely God is punishing me. Surely I've done something that I shouldn't have done, and this is why this has happened. And yet, in every way possible, God was trying to communicate to me the complete opposite message. But in my heaviness, in my pain, that message was not coming through.
Right.
I want to back up a little bit because as I was seeing that, I'm reminded that, and I talk about this in my book, Miracles in the Darkness. I talk about some of the unusual things that happened a month before the accident even happened. Like during that month leading up to the accident, I had these remarkable experiences where God was communicating. I walked into a funeral. This was a funeral for a young mom with 3 young children, and her husband was standing there. And I walked in, and I just was flooded with these messages, and it was so unusual. And I didn't know where all this was coming from or why I was receiving this, but I was receiving. It was like God was talking to me, telling me how much He loved this husband and how much He cared for him and how much, and it made no sense to me at the time. But now looking back, I can see that God was saying this didn't happen because he was being punished, just like what's happening to you is not because you're being punished.
Mm-hmm.
But I couldn't receive that at the time. As the car was rolling, I heard a voice in my head that said, "Bring your arm in." And somehow, I don't know how, I heard the voice and I brought my arm in. That voice was calm. It was
Mhm.
peaceful. It was not urgent, frantic, all the ways that I would be communicating in the middle of an accident like
Yeah.
that. In the middle of all that chaos, this calm voice said, "Bring your arm in." And I heard of one woman and met another woman who lost their arm in a rollover car accident.
Mhm.
So all these different things happened that blessed me in the experience. From the perspective that I'm at now, I can see that this was part of God's plan for me. It was part of God's plan for my family. It was part of God's plan for Carrie. It was part of God's plan for David. That is very, very hard to see
Mm-hmm.
in the middle of it.
Right. Grief is such a blocker, right, to those
Yeah.
spiritual realities that God wants to send our way. Also, so I'm curious because you said you went to that funeral that was after your children had passed.
This was before.
Oh,
Before.
before. So you already kind of maybe had a sensitivity to the other side of the veil that was cracked open even further after the loss of your children?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I was, because of the spiritual training, the church training, the religious training, I was comfortable with the idea that the spirit spoke.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd had experience with spirit speaking to me. So I was comfortable with that idea, and I was willing to listen. And but some of these experiences that happened that month before were just like really so profound that I I they had no explanation. I also, the month before they passed away, I felt this sadness that I didn't understand. And it's almost, and I really believe in soul plans. I really believe that before we come here, that we map up out our life in some ways, not, not 100%, not, oh, I'm going to be here at this time and so on and so forth. We have so much agency and choice. That is a big part of our existence here, is agency and choice. But before we come, we map out a soul plan, we map out a plan for our life. And our soul knows, my soul knew that this was coming, but I didn't know what it was. I couldn't have even wrapped my head around that. I don't think,
Right.
if I could have. But after Carrie's death, I found her scriptures with a program tucked in it, and she had drawn a stick figure, and over this stick figure she wrote Jesus, and then she drew a stick figure of herself, and she put her name over the top, Carrie, and she had an arrow going from Jesus, from Carrie to Jesus, like
Wow.
she was. And it was, to me, that was like her little message that she sent to us, that said, this is where I'm going and this is
Right.
where I am.
Yeah. We had a similar
It's
experience before my son passed, where he talked about, I want to go live with Jesus. I want to go be in heaven. I want to go tomorrow. And he ended up passing later that week. So it's just like, I
Wow.
think their higher self or their soul
right.
feels into that plan, and they kind of accept it ahead of time, or so it prepares them in some way.
And or I know that you deal a lot with angel messages, heavenly messengers and things, Julie. We obviously do as well. It's not uncommon to have kind of that precognition feeling. And I do think that our loved ones on the other side are angels, angel guides and things on the other side. There's a preparatory work sometimes, I think, that's in hand for all of us. And that divine plan for each of us for our progression, it's mercifully done. It's really hard in the moment of that grief to access that mercy sometimes, but like the preparation in reverse, hindsight is 2020, right? You can look back and kind of see the tender mercy that was applied to your life in preparation. I have heard so many people that talk about that, and Lindsay being one of them. She had a very similar experience, which she referred to even on the podcast with her husband, where he had that same very sense of like, something is coming, something's changing. These are the last times I'm doing these things. I need to appreciate them, right?
Right.
And so I think being really in tune, and I love you talked about having an open heart to that kind of already, like accepting the whisperings of those angels and the spirit in your life before being ready for that. Because God never gives us anything, I think, completely unprepared. Every task that we're given, everything that we're asked to do along that soul progression, um, is something that we've either signed up for beforehand for our own good, right? In the greater context of things. And it's all accumulative. It leads up to one another. And so I don't think God is ever like gonna cut the rope and let us drop. So I
Well,
love that you can see that.
and I used to say, and this was even before Carrie and David passed away, I used to say, I stood in the wrong line in heaven. How do I take my
I
name off of that contract? I'm like, what was I thinking? I don't know.
overachiever.
Right.
I say the same thing. I'm like, what was I doing? What was I thinking?
Right. In a humorous context, I think about that. Everybody dies somehow, right? Everybody passes in some way. Maybe contingent on the work that we do, we deal with passing and all the forms of it quite a lot. So we're very aware of it. And I go through all of them in my head sometimes at night when I'm not sleeping because I have a newborn. So I don't sleep. And I'm like, which way would I prefer? Which way did I sign up for? Can I get off that list? Can I jump to a different one now?
That's interesting. Okay, so Carrie and David passed away in May, and that October I walked into a drugstore and I saw the costumes hanging there. And my immediate thought was, Carrie would love that costume. There was this witch's costume, like the flowy, the hat, the whole thing. And immediately after I had that thought, the pain just
Right.
surged through me. She's not here. There
Yeah.
is going to be no costume. There is going to be no fun Halloween trick or treating night. All of that is not going to happen this year. And in my head, I said, why did this have to happen? And I heard, they're right where they're supposed to be. And I said, why did it have to happen this way? I was in so much pain. And I was looking around at the pain of my family and feeling everybody's pain and feeling like I'm the reason. I'm the reason they're not here. I'm the reason I'm in pain. I'm the reason my whole family is in pain. So I immediately asked the question, why did it have to happen this way? And I heard, how would you have liked it to happen? And there's no good answer.
Yeah.
Right.
In that moment, my brain went searching for what could have been this, it could have been this, could have been this. Literally 5 years before they passed away, we had moved into a new house. They had gone upstairs and they had opened the window upstairs, both leaning on the screen, yelling down to the dog in the backyard, and they fell out the second story window.
What?
Yes. In
Oh
this
my gosh.
freak accident, landing on the pool deck,
What?
no less.
Oh my
Both
gosh.
of them did?
Both of them.
Wow.
These
Both
guys are
of
like a
them.
package team.
Yeah. They 100% were. And they had minor injuries. David
Wow.
literally had zero injuries.
Wasn't their
And
time.
Carrie had minor fractures to her wrists.
Unbelievable.
And that was it. And I look back on that and I think, oh, that was an exit point.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we were given
Mhm.
5 more years.
Wow.
And so I always say, I had a choice to be their mom for 8 and 10 years, or I had a choice not to be their mom. And I choose to be their mom
Right.
every day, even if it was just those 8 and 10 years. Of course, I'm always their mom.
Yeah, through the
But
veil, right?
Here physically, right? Here physically.
Yeah.
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 So,
Have that time with them on this earth. It's a really great concept, I think, to approach when the time is right, when you can move into that point after grief of like, there really isn't a good time. Like there's never a good time for a tragedy to occur. So you have to kind of, that goes back onto the whole concept of like trust that it is the right time divinely. Like in the whole concept of things on their timeline and on your timeline of progression, it's going to be the time that is best for all of you.
yeah, at one point, a couple of years down the line, I was, talking to God again in my head, saying, why are my teenage boys, because my daughters had gone off to college. I had a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old sons at home when this happened. And I remember talking to God one day and saying, this could be, by this time they're like 14 and 17, in the midst of the horrible hormones of teenage years, and they've got a mom that's completely checked out.
Right.
And I was just like, why? I mean, this isn't fair to them. This isn't, I can't even, I'm not functioning very well here. And I heard somehow the spirit was able to continue to speak to me in little snatches, and they received little openings where they could speak to me. But this, I just heard this was their plan too.
Mm-hmm.
This is their
Yeah.
life experience too. So it wasn't just about me. I also want to go back to what you said about the package deal. I literally, as I sat in that car, knowing that Carrie and David had been thrown from the car, not knowing if they were dead or alive or what the circumstances were going to be, I knew in that moment that they were either both here or both gone.
Hmm.
They definitely were that package deal.
I'm just getting chills as you're saying that. It's so interesting how people are linked in that way sometimes.
Yeah.
Right?
They were exceptionally close. And especially for a boy and a girl 2 years apart,
Right.
the harassing younger brother syndrome and the whole thing. And they were exceptionally close. As we went through pictures, we noticed how many pictures there were of them hugging.
Oh,
Oh,
They were just, I'm, yeah, almost all the pictures of the two of them, they were like wrapped around each other.
I think life kind of seems to move in themes going forward. Themes for each season, right? Themes for growth, themes for the things that we tend to notice and pick up. A theme that I've been noticing recently is how myopic our view is of where we're living right now. Like what we see in this life, in this what we get to experience is really abbreviated. And there was so much that came before, and there's so much that's going to come after. And a couple of the experiences that I've had recently, having experienced my own daughter, I talked about it on an episode we had just a couple of weeks ago, where she came to me before she was even here. So I have a 1.5 month old, and before she was even here, I had experiences with her kind of through that veil into where she came, like the pre-Earth part of her existence, and she very clearly let me know that she knew me before we knew each other, and our souls had eons of time, right? Of time spent together that we were already linked, and it was just something that I couldn't remember here, but that she remembered, and that at some point later I was that recognition was going to return to me. And so I've had multiple experiences in sessions with people and things. Just one, in fact, last night, where someone had a similar situation where they had lost a younger brother at a very young age, and they had always felt um, like she had felt close with him. And he had let me know it was a similar situation. Their spirits had known each other before they got here. They had spent all of that time together. It was pre-organized that they were going to come, that he was going to pass as an infant. And that's all, it's all in part of each of their soul plans. But it's so amazing to me how limited our scope seems to be. And we can't ever forget that there was a whole lifetime before. There will be
Right.
lifetimes, after as well. And
Right.
so I love to hear these stories of like, yeah, of course they knew each other. Of course they were prepared. Of course they were siblings there. And they knew that they were going to come down and have this experience and then go together, right? Like I think there's a comfort in that, and to back up within our experience, and see that there's a much bigger picture that we
Much bigger picture.
have
Yes.
access to right now.
Julie, something I want to ask you. It says on your website, I'm just going to read. It says in 2012, I had a profound experience that sent me on a search for even more answers. I knew I was being directed to help others who had experienced an overwhelming loss, like I had. But how do I do that? So I want to know, how did you do it?
Well, I'm going to back up a little bit because at the 3 year mark, I was doing very poorly. I had been working with a therapist for 2.5 years. We'd done a lot of um, EMDR therapy to help me overcome PTSD. But I was tanking. And one of the things that happened is because I'd had these other grief experiences prior to my kid's death, I was familiar with grief. And so in the beginning, I was extremely patient with myself. And a lot of the reactions that I have had looking back were related to PTSD. So
Mhm.
I not only was dealing with grief, but I was dealing with PTSD, but I was very patient with myself. But about the, I would say, year and a half mark, I started losing patience. I started
Mhm.
thinking, oh, I should be doing better than I am, which I'm just going to point out is a shame thought. So at any point when you're thinking, I should be doing better than I am, no matter what it's related to, that's shame. That's saying that I I am not as good as I should be. So we can look at ourselves and we can say, oh, I want this area to improve, or I want that area to improve, or I want to work on this. But to shame ourselves by saying I should be doing better, that just creates more weight. And that's a lot of what I've found working with people with grief is it's all the emotions. It's not just the sadness of the loss and the overwhelming sadness of the loss, in which we call grief, but it's guilt, it's shame, it's fear,
Right.
it's all those things mixed up together. But I was doing so poorly. And at the 3 year mark, one of the leaders at my church offered to offer this special prayer on my behalf. And when that happened, the lights just came on. And within 24 hours, I felt like a whole new person. I went from this person that the darkness in me was so heavy that it was tangible. It was almost as if I could feel the darkness in my soul and my spirit. And that darkness just lifted, and I felt like a whole new person. It's not that I was perfect. It's not that I'm this special person that deserved this miraculous healing. What I've learned is all healing is miraculous. It doesn't matter if it takes a month, 10 years, or a week. It's all miraculous. It's all just like when you cut your finger and it heals, it's a miracle. It's, Albert Einstein said, we can look at things as if nothing is a miracle or as if everything is a miracle. And he says, I choose the latter. So, and I do too. And so I just look at it as it's all miraculous. But I had that experience of healing. And 2 years later, almost, yeah, about 2.5 years later, my mom had invited me to lunch with another couple that I hadn't met before. And in the course of this lunch, this man was sharing his experience of going through some really painful things and his mental health and how he had found answers and then was now working with other people, helping them. And my mom turned to me, which was so odd and so unexpected. And she turns to me and she said, Julie, tell them your story. And I was like, oh my gosh. I was truly just shocked by her request. And I because I wasn't used to telling my story at that point. It was but at any rate, very briefly, I shared the loss of our two children and my experiences with that. As we were leaving the restaurant, this man stopped me. He took me by the arm and he said, you're supposed to do something with this. And it was like a lightning bolt. It was like God was standing in front of me saying, you're supposed to do something with this. And I knew it from the depth of my soul. I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what that would look like. I didn't even know where to start. But I knew that what he said was not just him saying it, that it was confirmed by that feeling that what he was saying was true. And that's what took me on the search of looking for answers and looking for what does that look like? What does that mean? And I actually even enrolled to go back to college to become a therapist because I thought, okay, well, this is the way people do it. So I'm going to become a therapist. And the first week of class, I was looking around and I was thinking, this isn't it. This is not where I'm supposed to be. This is not what I'm supposed to be doing. But I think I needed to enroll and sit there in that classroom to know that this wasn't it. And I discovered coaching and I started to, I'd hired a couple of coaches and I'd had some really good experiences. And then I felt, okay, this is it. This is what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to go take a coaching course and I can help people. This was my initial thought. My initial thought was when I walked, so after that miraculous healing, after that kind of spontaneous healing that I experienced, my therapist was like, okay, you're good. I remember walking out of her office going, okay, I'm good, but what am I supposed to do with my life? So my initial thought was, I'll become a coach and I'll be that bridge helping people to rebuild their life, thus the name Build a Life After Loss. So I started coaching people. And as I was coaching people, I noticed things that are pretty predominant in grief. One of the predominant things in grief, well, I noticed a lot of things, but some of the things that really are affected by grief, in addition to the grief, is losing our purpose in life, losing relationships, challenges in relationships, are just our personal confidence, our personal identity, and even our health can be affected by grief. And so I wanted to have a program that would kind of take those things into account. And eventually I developed the hope model of healing, because hope is the starting point. Hope is that
Hmm.
piece. And that's what I felt even after my kids died miraculously. Again, it's heaven working through the cracks. I was doing an angel reading for a dad who had lost his son to suicide. And I felt his son in the room, and this dad had had these experiences since his son had died, and I saw, and when I say saw, like this is in my mind's eye, what I was shown was this layer, this cloud of grief around him. And then there would be this break in the clouds. And when the break in the clouds came, his son was able to communicate with him. And then after his son communicated with him, that cloud of grief would overwhelm him again. And then he would start questioning
Right.
the
Right.
communication.
Yeah.
And so, being able to explain to him, this is what's happening. So when you start questioning that communication from your son, just know that that's the grief speaking. And it's okay that you're grieving, but trust the
Glimmers.
impressions,
Yeah.
the glimmers that you receive.
Oftentimes we're inaccessible because of where we are, and we have to be gentle with ourselves through that process and not rush it, like you were saying, right? We can't put an expectation on the amount of time that it's going to take for us to work
Mm-hmm.
again. But I love it because heaven never stops trying. And in those moments through the cracks, God is there. They are there. They're always there. In the work that Camille and I do too, that is one of the main things. People come with questions of like, well, where do they go? Why can't I feel them? Why are they not around me anymore? And it's like, back up just a step. This is those intruding thoughts. This is your own grief. This is your own fear. They are always present. And when you back up just a step, you can maybe realize that. So I want to branch us off into the question, like how did angels start making a play into this journey for you? And where did you begin to see and recognize that and your own gifts with being able to see and recognize that?
Well, it all began with the coaching, because as I started to work with clients, I was feeling more and more their loved ones around them. If they were working with me because they'd lost a wife or their father or a child, I would feel that person in the room with us. I knew that their loved one was here working with us, working through me to help their father, mother, husband, wife, so forth. I didn't know how to communicate that to people, but I would feel like, I'd be working with a mom and she would be expressing her guilt about something that happened with a son, and I would feel him in my ear saying, I don't feel bad about that at all. She did fine. I would just feel all that, but I didn't really know how to communicate that, but I would express what I was receiving. But over time, that just became more and more prominent. And then in 2020, I was actually running errands and got into my car and felt a friend's son with me. He had died only 2 weeks before. And I didn't know him that well, but I knew his mom. His mom was a friend of mine. But when he showed up, I just knew it was him. I just like, it was just this overwhelming sense that he was there in the car with me, and I didn't know what to do with that. But I thought, okay, if he's here for a reason. And this is what I would share with people. If you're feeling someone with you, if you're feeling that, like, they're there to communicate with you. And so the first part is just acknowledging that they're there, but then also asking, is there something more that you want to share? So I didn't know what to do at that point because that was a really unusual situation for me for someone outside of my own family to kind of show up and make their presence known. I just grabbed my phone and just started writing down everything that I was hearing and sensing. And I wrote all that down and eventually found an opportunity to share that with his mom.
Did she receive it well? I mean, she's a friend of yours, so
Yeah. Well, she's a quieter person, and so yes, I think she did. But yeah, and one of the things that was really confirming for me in this situation was there was one message that was delivered from a dad to his daughter, and I had worked with this daughter several months before, and I hadn't had any communication with her since then. And he was delivering this message, and I thought, should I be saying that to her? Like, it just did not feel, because he was talking about, when she marries and have kids, and when I had worked with her, I wasn't even sure that she was interested in getting, you know what I mean? So I was just like, oh, should I say that? Like that just, anyway, it was funny, my reaction to it, but it was so strong. Yes, communicate that. And so I put that in the message. And I kid you not, 2 months later, a family member of hers who I was still connected with posted pictures of her wedding. I had no idea. I had no idea. I had no. So apparently, when I sent her the message, she was engaged already, and I didn't know anything about it. No
and she was
wonder I.
probably wondering what's his opinion on this, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
When people say, my son, my daughter, my husband, they're going to miss out on this wedding, or they're going to miss out on this, and I'm like, they're not missing out on anything.
right.
Yeah.
They're not missing out on anything. I mean, yes, of course, we're missing their physical presence, and there's that aspect of it, but they are so aware.
It doesn't surprise me that your grief coaching also encompassed these angel messages because it's such a sacred work helping somebody, and grief is typically the lowest point of someone's life, right?
Right.
And if
Right.
it's in their soul contract, they're going to go through this loss, like they're still going to like it's going to be like the bottom, like the rut of their life, like that point. And so to be able to help somebody work through that and help them pick themselves up is very sacred. And so it doesn't surprise me that messages are coming through to you because the spirits on the other side want to help their loved ones go through that as well.
Right.
Like often I feel it's funny in like a session, somebody will ask, well, how's my loved one on the other side? Are they okay? Are they happy? And yeah, they're good, but they're also a little worried about you. Are you like that you're okay? So it's like this back and forth.
Exactly. My understanding was always our loved ones are on the other side, loving us and caring about us. Like I'm a big genealogist too. And that was a big part of my life for many years where I was doing genealogy, I was teaching it, I was speaking at conferences, and I had these miraculous things that would happen in all of that work. The whole idea of angels was a different concept for me that I wasn't quite connected to. But a few years ago, right about this same time, 2020-ish, I started noticing 12s everywhere. The number 12 was like everywhere. And my birthday is on the 12th of the month. And so it stood out to me and felt personal. And it was too often to just be accidental. And I started asking, what do 12 means? And then it was so often that I finally just had to open my heart and mind to this idea of angels. And I started looking at this, and I know my daughter was sending those 12s to me too, but it opened my eyes to something larger, grander, broader than my initial understanding. That's when I started very much believing in these ways that they communicate with us from the other side. Before that, I have to say I was pretty skeptical. I mean, you're listening to me talk about hearing voices in my head, and you're like, how could you be skeptical? But I was.
You talk yourself out of it all the time.
Exactly. But I could not dismiss the 12s. And I finally got to the point where I put a note in my phone, and every day I wrote down 6 to 10 times a day little signs that I was seeing, things that I was seeing. I would see things in nature, and anytime I started to just, instead of dismissing it, anytime I thought, could that be an angel? I I allowed myself to say yes.
Hmm.
And that was a big turning point for me. Almost 2 years ago, I was in Mexico. We were on a whale watching trip. It was a pathetic whale watching trip. I was super grumpy. We were on an uncomfortable boat. It was the middle of the afternoon. We weren't seeing anything. And I'm like, this is my first time whale watching. I've heard they're great, and this is going to be a dud. This was what was going on in my head. And then I heard, Julie, you have angels. And I just like lit up. And I went, I have angels. And in my mind, I started saying, thank you for bringing the boat close to the whales. Thank you for bringing the whales close to the boat. Angels, thank you for bringing me. And I just repeated that over and over in my mind. And within 10 minutes, we were surrounded by whales and dolphins.
Wow,
We had
that's
whales
amazing.
on every side. They were doing tricks. We had dolphins swimming along the boat, like flipping up out of there. It was a show. It was grander than anything that I've ever seen at SeaWorld. And I grew up in Florida. So I was in so much bliss that I didn't even pull out my camera. And the next day, I heard that voice say, start teaching about angels. And so I
Wow.
came home from that trip and started doing workshops on angels.
That is brilliant. And I love that story and its demonstration of like um, practical application for things that would seem almost meaningless, right? It wasn't life or death. It wasn't like all of your eternity hinged on this moment. It was like whale watching. Like, that's not important for the future, maybe, right?
Right.
But they care. They're in the details, and in those details are connection.
They don't want to just, pull us out of the danger. They want us to experience joy.
Hmm.
And
Right.
and I think the other thing that, misperception that we have, not only that, they just show up when it's an emergency. That's not the case at all. They're not the fire department. They are just there always. The other misperception that I had, and that many people that I work with have, is that they are judging us, that they're standing around, judging us and paying attention to everything that we're doing and thinking, oh, you did that wrong and you did that wrong. Like, nobody wants that in their presence all the time. And thinking that actually prevents us from feeling their presence. So when
Right.
we let go of that idea that they're judging us, and we hold on to the idea that they're loving us, just like a parent would love a toddler that's learning to walk. When I make mistakes, my angels are sitting there going, oh, isn't she cute? She fell down again.
Yeah.
If we're going to go into like the metaphysics, it's bringing that energy, that vibration, that high frequency of love is going down in your body, right? Which is actually distancing you from everything that is more pure, that is on the other side, that higher frequency, the light, the love, the positive emotions and stuff. You're actually pulling yourself away from that, which makes it harder to facilitate that kind of communication.
Humans, we're not going to be perfect at any of this, but we can certainly be aware of how we're doing and try to, like Elle said, create moments where we increase that vibration, have that, throw out that childlike faith. I had a similar experience in Hawaii when I really wanted to see sea turtles on the river and nobody else was seeing them that day. And I was just like praying and hoping and keeping my eyes up, like they're going to show up any minute now. And I saw like 8 of them.
Wow.
It doesn't always play out that way. We don't always get the miracles we seek, but the more we ask, the more likely we are to receive, right? Sometimes we miss the signs that they send because maybe we're looking for something bigger, right? And I don't
Right.
know, Julie, if you're like me, where after your children passed more recently, like there was more significant spiritual experiences with them that kind of came naturally and then sort of like waned a little bit. That's what happened when my son passed. And then I was like, where did he go? Is that it? Is he gone? Like too busy on the other side? And I started to notice things like you were talking about the number 12, where my angel number is 101, or just little thoughts that would come into my head where I was like, I feel like that wasn't coming from me. The other side sent me that thought. It was just more subtle things. But if you, like you said, you take note of them and you add them all together, signs are abundant. We just have to, put ourselves out there like, I think this could be an angel sign. Acknowledge it, be thankful for it and ask for more. Like, and you keep note of what's going on. There's abundance.
They want to be acknowledged. They want their presence to be known. And just like Elle was saying, when we open ourselves up to that, then we receive more of it.
Like this happened with me just the other day. I was on my way to church and I had gotten no sleep. And I was almost not even gonna make it. My husband had taken the kids and he had gone earlier, and I was coming in our second car, and I had fully intended to stay and just sleep through church. But I had this feeling that I needed to get up and go. So I did, and I had already missed half of it. And I was almost to our church building and I saw a cardinal too. And in that moment, bird signs are one of the ones that are more easily dismissed by me. I'm like, birds are doing bird stuff outside. That's what birds do. But in this moment with this cardinal, it flew right in front of my car as I turned, not in a dangerous way for the poor bird, but like in a meaningful type way. And immediately I thought of my grandmother, and I could have just continued driving. I was very sleep deprived, but in that moment, I paused. And when I paused, I felt a confirmation feeling in my heart of, yeah, it was my grandmother. And she was giving me a nod, right? An acknowledgement of, hi, like a hello from heaven. And it felt meaningful. It felt special. And I think once you open your heart to that and you begin to establish a pattern, you'll feel a difference. You'll feel something, and it will build that certainty in you that that's what they're doing. There's some kind of a spiritual um, meaning that builds over time, a difference in the way it feels from any other normal life
Like a
circumstance, right?
substance. There's a substance to it.
Substance, yes,
Right.
thank you for the
Yeah,
words.
it's like when I
Substance
heard
to it.
it's like when I heard on that whale watching trip, you have, Julie, you have angels. When I heard that, it's like it came with this feeling of euphoria. It came with
Right.
this feeling of uplift.
This has been an incredible opportunity to catch up with Julie. We're going to have her back for a second episode. We didn't cover half of what we wanted to, but I wanted to give her an opportunity to share with our listeners and watcher viewers where they can find her if they're interested in reading her book or her coaching. So, Julie, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
You can find me on Instagram at Julie Cluff Coaching. I'm pretty active there. I have a website, juliecluff.com. At the time of this recording, it's under construction, so everything's not in place, but that will lead you to my new podcast, Light the Day. It will lead you to Build a Life After Loss with all the grief resources and so forth. So yeah, it's a good place.
Amazing.
And we'll include all of that in the show notes below also, so you guys will have a quick link to be able to access Julie and all the amazing resources that she offers.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being with us. If you guys want to join our Facebook community, the link is also below in the show notes. And it's been such a great conversation. Can't wait to see you guys next time.